Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. You can be seated. All right, welcome everybody to today's meeting. First up on the agenda is the approval of the agenda, and I'll move it.
Second.
All right, motion by Bittinger, second by Nelson. Any discussion, changes? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. Items 2 through 7 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Number 2 is approval of the minutes from the April 22nd, 2025 meeting. Number 3 is approval of claims. Number 4 from Human Resources, Melissa Thomas, it's the approval of the memorandum of personnel transactions. Number 5 from County Auditor, Michelle Scaff, it's to receive the county recorder's report of fees collected. And item B is receive the appointment of Jessica Slimp to the Hornick City Council. Number 6 from County Treasurer Tina Bertrand is the approval to approve the property tax refund request for parcel ending in 1010 in the amount of $223.55. And item B is approved property tax refund request for parcel ending in 4007 in the amount of $2,028. And number 7 from Board Administration Ryan Erickson. So the public hearing for the fiscal year 25 budget amendment number 1 from May 27th, 2025 at 4:45 p.m. And so with that, I will move the consent agenda.
A second.
All right, moved by Bittinger, second by Dietrich. Any comments or discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. All right, on to item number 8, budget miscellaneous review of fiscal year 26, all funds. First up, we have approval to correct budget line item in general basic for Veterans Affairs. And so in the backup, you'll see, let me get there myself. There was the budget information was inputted incorrectly at 1,148 when it should be 11,480. And so in the backup, you can see the budget comparison report with that highlighted in red. So we just need to move to correct the line amount in that for fiscal year 26 budget. So that's what that first item A is. So I would move that.
Second.
All right, motion by Bittinger, second by Carper. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. With that, any other miscellaneous budget reviews, any action, anything from auditor staff, anything?
Since we have a few minutes to the set time, if you'd like me to go ahead and go through the changes
Sure.
since the last
Yeah,
time.
that'd be fine.
Okay, so if we look at our changes after last budget meeting, we have the 10,000, which was just approved, which I will move over to the new changes that'll be incorporated into the budget. The general supplemental, we had reduced the current tax levy by $474,481, and we also increased the workers' comp by 10,000. So our new deficit now will be 482,411, and you'll see that as a deficit since we're no longer going to be taxing the full amount that we had plugged in prior to the last meeting. The rural basic, we reduced the transfer to the rural supplemental fund so that we could hold the levy constant, and that was a reduction of 129,800. So that rural basic will now have a deficit of $93,851. The rural supplemental, we did change the auditor's transfer to that so that we'll only be taxing the amount that will make the rural levy the same as it was last year. There was a clerical error in this, in that last year, I believe the number we wanted to plug in, we forgot the $50, so there's a very small difference in the approved motion that doesn't really make a penny of a difference as far as $100,000 value, and it's to the taxpayer's benefit for a very, very small amount for the $50 that we didn't include in that. So unless you really want to change that, it's just wanted to let you know that it occurred. So the levy's actually going to be a hair smaller in the rural area. So our total deficit between all of the taxing funds is $1,593,493, and that's a pretty big change, and we'll add that 10,000, so that will be $1,603 $1,603,493, compared to our beginning deficit of 4.1 million. So you can see through all these efforts, there's been a lot of reductions that has helped. There's also been changes in the beginning balance, which could have just as well been changed in the current fiscal year as auditor's transfers, as opposed to changing the beginning balance. Last year, our deficit was a lot higher than this, and I don't have those numbers right here, but that is the case. If we look at the beginning balances, I don't believe we made any changes to the beginning balance as of the last meeting. Nothing highlighted here, so I believe those all remain the same. So if we look at our reserves versus expenses, this bottom chart is going to include the 10,000 that was just changed from Veterans Affairs. So you can see that our ending reserve balance at the end of fiscal year 26, so June 30th of 2026, is 22.9%, which is a very good reserve balance. The general sup is 3.54. And the rural basic is 15.37. The rural sup is basically zero because we are receiving tax revenue for the amount of expenses that will be moved to that fund. If we add those together, as we've been doing in the last few meetings, we're showing a surplus in the general and the general supplemental fund of allowing us to have 2 months of expenses, which is $8,956,776. Our ending balance will cover those 2 months of expenses and leave a surplus of $421,000. So if the budget were approved as is, there would be enough money to account for the 2 months in expenses, which is what's recommended by our auditor, and have a surplus. If we look at the rural basic and the rural supplemental, we have a small deficit of $86,918 to cover those 2 months in expenses. And so that's where we fall. If we look at our levies, as of the last meeting, column H here is our general basic. Amount of tax revenue has stayed constant throughout the budget process due to House File 718, that the tax revenue received from property taxes will be $21,615,700. The general supplemental has our first notice published that tax revenue of $15 million, 15.2 plus. Our second publication published 14.1. And after last meeting, we've lowered it to what was the amount to keep the levy the same, which is 13.6, which matches the keeping the levy same column. Our debt service has remained constant across the board. One thing that we did not have an opportunity to do was to assess the CIP projects to see if there is any revenue that was not, or expenses that were not made in CIP projects that potentially could lower the debt levy, and then that could be redirected. I know we had kind of talked about it here and there, but that's something that could be thought of down the road in the future to help reduce the debt service levy. Rural Basic has been constant. This one is held to House File 718's figures, which is $3,827,629. And now here's our rural SUP, which we're creating so that our levy will be the same in the rural areas as it was last year. And you can see that actually to keep the levy the same, we would have requested $76,515, and due to our little clerical error, we dropped the 50. So we're actually have your motions approved to make it $76,500 due to, I'll take responsibility for that $50 difference, which is in that area. So when we look down here, current as of the last meeting, the countywide levy is exactly the same as it was last year. To keep the levy the same, 7.11118. And the rural levy is 9.52405, and you can see that last year it was actually 9.52408. So you can see that small difference of that $50 made. Over here, what we can see is the amount of right here in column M is if the levy were the same as last year, $7.74, and this yellow box, $7.74, is how much a taxpayer will pay to the county for a $100,000 residence more than they paid last year. So the actual amount last year they would have paid to the county was $329.55. This year it will be $337.29 as the budget sits right now, which is a $7.74 increase per $100,000 to the county portion of taxes. And the reason why it is not the same, because the levy is the same, the reason is because the rollback is different this year. Mm-hmm. And so that creates a higher amount of taxes that the residents will pay. If you look at the rural area down here, $10.37, so that $50 doesn't even make a penny of a difference on $100,000. So you can see last year, the individual with $100,000 residence would have paid $441.37 to the county, and this year it's $451.74 to the county.
All right. Any questions by the board? All right, with that, that brings us almost to our 4:45 set time. Let's go into item A. It's set the public hearing for the fiscal year 26 proposed budget for April 29, 2025 at 4:45 p.m. and acknowledge publication of notice as required by Iowa Code. You can see in the backup there, we're just going through, we're going to set the public hearing for today at 4:45, so I will move that agenda item.
Second.
Motion by Bittinger, second by Nelson. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes 5-0. All right, with that, we are at our 4:45 set time for the public hearing on proposed fiscal year 2026 budget. So with that, I will we'll open up the hearing.
May I ask a quick
Yeah,
procedural question first?
Sure.
Did we get all the newspapers in line?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. Good question. Yeah. Yep. Thank you, Karen and Heather, for taking care of that, making sure that was done. All right, with that, let's open up our public hearing. Is there anybody from the public here to speak about the budget?
Don't all come up at once. Seeing none, Mr. Chair, I move that the public hearing be closed.
All right, I'll second that. All right, motion by Nelson, second by Bittinger. All right, any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes 5-0. All right, on to item C, which is approval of resolution, setting elected officials' wages. It's item C, so with that, we'll open up the discussion. If there's any elected officials here who want to say anything, come forward. We want to, if not, I know we've been talking, everybody, so. So with the board, we'll open up, board discussion, any board thoughts? So floor is open, if anybody has any thoughts or recommendations or motions, and we'll go from there.
Well, I talked in the past about this and for this year, and as Auditor Scap presented here a little bit ago, we've got enough to cover the first 2 months next year with about a $400,000 surplus. I'm glad we got that covered, but really, we're still cutting it pretty close, especially given that a lot of our budgets cut out a lot of replacement and that kind of thing. I think that we're all kind of hoping for the best, but we all know how life works, and I think that we'll have surprises as we get through this year, and we're probably gonna have to use some reserves, replacing a vehicle or fixing a building or something. I mean, there will be something that pops up. So we're not I wouldn't say I'm very comfortable or too comfortable with where the reserve levels are at. And so as leaders and elected officials, we eat last. And so I think that the board, the supervisors took a 0%. I'd like to see that from our other elected officials as well. That money can be used to, kind of strengthen our reserve amounts. It is my understanding, talking with our Assistant County Attorney Joshua Widman, that given the compensation board's recommendation for Auditor Scaff, that there was a percentage increase for her salary, and then there was a stipend that I believe was related to the extra work that she had to do when Dennis left. And so I would be agreeable to reducing, like I said, all the elected officials' wages down to 0%, but I would like to see that stipend remain as a sign of appreciation for the over and above work that the auditor had to do for 6 months, 8 months, 9 months. And so I appreciate that, Michelle. I don't know how we would have gotten to this point without your efforts. I don't think it's honestly enough for what was done, but that's what's on my mind.
Joshua, do you want to just give for the board, just a clarification on stipend, just to kind of sort of be on the same page of what that is or not is?
Yeah, I know the recommendation is to call it a stipend, and there may be other counties that are doing that or calling it that. The way that the code reads, in future years, the board would not be able to reduce that. So a one-time stipend or one-time payment isn't really contemplated by the code. So it's permissible, but the board needs to be aware that in following years, the base salary is going to include that amount. So whatever you want to do with that, I think that that's the way the code reads, though, that next year you'd start with whatever the salary is plus that stipend and go forward.
Thank you. All right, any other thoughts from the board?
So to clarify, there is no way to do a 1-year addition to the base wage, Joshua?
There's not a way to do a 1-year spike. So whatever you do would be carried forward, whether you want to, obviously you can't buy in future boards, but if there'd be an understanding that you do an incremental, for several years in a row or something, you could have that intent or specify that intent. But yeah, under the way that the compensation board and compensation section reads now, the only way for there to be a decrease from a prior year amount that's given to elected official is if the duties changed, and that's the situation where you have the the recorder and the auditor's duties no longer combined if they're, go back to split or part-time. So I don't know if that was a unintended consequence or not of the legislation, but that's the code section that we have to deal with.
Would the board be, I guess, on tenuous footing if there was a reduction based on, in a future year, based on some metric like staffing in the office or the, we've talked about a one-time increase in responsibility. If that is no longer the case next year, which would obviously be what we hope to see, is that enough justification? Or is it more substantial? Like we have to argue that half of the office is shut down or something drastic like that?
I think that the situation where you can reduce the amount from the prior year is limited to what's set out in the statute. And I'm just pulling up the statute here to get exactly what it says.
Yeah, that's my question too, Matthew, right? It will
But
obviously
I don't
change.
think we can argue things beyond what the statute says, and the statute only references the separation of the duties or going down to some sort of a part-time situation. So while those would be valid reasons to potentially reduce, I don't think the statute allows that.
Is that just for fiscal year '26 or so? Because earlier we voted to reduce the chair's stipend. Does it affect that as well?
So the supervisors are a little bit different in that you can decrease the supervisor's salary and obviously set it to whatever is appropriate. So that is the caveat there, that the supervisors are treated differently than what they can do with the other elected officials.
So with that news, yeah, that's what I asked Joshua earlier today about that. That would seem we would not be able to do that, to do a stipend. So with that, yeah, go ahead. Do you have anything?
Can you do bonuses? Are bonuses different than a stipend?
I don't think it matters what you call it. I think the bottom line is the dollar figure that they're paid 1 year, the following year, that can't be reduced.
Okay. All right, thank you for that clarification, Joshua. All right, with that, we're back to just discussion on that and about what does the board want to, Chad, were you coming to the mic, Chad? You can go if you need to. Yeah, any elected officials want to say anything, feel free to, you want to say anything? And
Good evening, Tina Bertrand, Woodbury County Treasurer. I guess I'm going to be first again. Thank you for having the opportunity to speak. I know I've had a couple of conversations with board members regarding kind of where we're at with some of this stuff, and I know we've been working really hard. I think everybody has been to try to balance the budget. When asked to reduce our budget down to a 2 to 3%, I know I came forward with some cuts in expenses on a very small budget on expenses. Tried to look at the additional revenue to bring in. Have worked pretty hard at even looking at this year's current budget to see what we might be able to add to the reserves going into FY26. But I am going to say that, kind of given where we're at, I'm going to advocate for at least a 3% increase, not just for myself, but it does impact the deputies in my office. I think that they are definitely worthy of that. They work very hard. We are a very public-facing department. I think, people probably get tired of hearing how many people come through my office, but an average of 250 people a day come through. We do probably 120 phone calls a day on average. So I think there's a lot of hard workers in our office. I can say that we do have people that do work overtime, even at the deputy level. So it's not that it's a 8 to 4:30 job that we all leave from. And I don't think I could say that. Maybe I got to say it the other way. I think I could say the same thing about a lot of the leaders and management team throughout the county. I think that we have a very hardworking, dedicated staff. I just think that I know we are in a very difficult budget era right now. It's going to remain the same next year. I know for my staff in particular, we have frozen one position. I know I'm also looking at that deputy level position, and I know that's unusual for an elected official to give up a deputy level or even contemplate giving up a deputy level. But I think that that's what's right for our community. I think that it's right to look at it and it's right to look at our operations to streamline the best we can. I know that probably the underlying thing is as leaders we go without. And that, we come forward. I'm not so sure that, I guess I have a different perspective. One of my perspective is if you're running an organization and you're in charge of that organization fiscally, all parties that contribute need to be paid or it can't actually function. It'll eventually, you'll lose resources, you'll lose talent, you'll lose the ability to actually function appropriately. And I think that's something that needs to be kept in mind. I know one of the other things, and this is probably not a popular consideration for some really long-term employees, but I would be open to looking at some of the longevity bonuses. I think that when they were established, it was good philosophy. It had some sense, some common sense, but I'm not sure that that really keeps pace with wages overall over the long term period. If you're here for a very long time, it may catch up, but I think it takes several years to be able to catch up from a 0% increase over time. And I think that that just hurts our ability to provide services, adequate services to our community. So I guess that's all I have to say for the moment. Thanks.
Thanks, Tina. Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you from this side of the fence for a change. So I'm here to advocate for my staff, and I believe that the deputies are deserving of the increase. You mentioned the stipend and wanting to award me a stipend. I'd rather see my staff get a cost of living than me to get a stipend. I've always went above and beyond in my role. My deputies do the same, and they deserve to have a cost of living. They continuously see the department heads, which I believe that the deputies of an elected official are equivalent to a department head for the board. The department heads have an opportunity to get an additional amount, such as JD got this year. It was described as, I'm going to give that person a 10% because they've never had a raise. They've had a cost of living raise every year, just like the rest of the wage plan has. That 10% was above and beyond what all of the other wage plan people got. The deputies that are at the maximum, which is 85% of my wages, they don't have that opportunity. They're tied by law to receive 85%, so they can't have a 10% bump up. They deserve to have an increase. I'd be willing to give up my stipend, if you want to take that off the table, if my deputies can get their increase. They do more than their job requires. They work overtime and they're not paid for overtime. Just the changes that are being made today, they're going to be working tomorrow to get those figures so that they can be input in the budget. And that budget has to be to us by 4:30 tomorrow afternoon. So it takes a lot of work on their end to get the figures of whatever gets decided today, because we have a really short turnaround on the budget. I think all of the elected officials, that we all have deputies with the exception of the board. That's the difference between I, the sheriff, the attorney, and the treasurer. I have 3 deputies. 30 years ago is when the auditor and recorder's offices were combined. and I'm not sure if everyone's familiar, but there's only 2 counties in the state that have a combined auditor recorder's office. So we have saved for 30 years for the county 1 recorder and 1 deputy. Because if you look at those 2 offices, normally there's 3 deputies in the auditor side and 1 deputy in the recorder side. So there's been a lot of money saved over the years. There's also, the treasurer has some of those duties as well that used to be in the recorder's office. So there was a separation, sharing those recorder's responsibilities between the treasurer and the auditor. I also wanted to mention some of the changes just over the last few years. I asked my deputies, about language barriers, because that's come to my attention a lot more recently, is the language barriers that they have dealing with individuals in elections that don't speak English, and so they have to find a way to communicate with these people. In the recorder's office, and I'm sure in the treasurer's office as well, communicating with individuals who have a different language is very difficult, and that's one of the challenges that they've had to deal with lately. The recorder's office has 8 clerks and 1 deputy. The finance side has 2 clerks and 1 deputy. The finance side runs all of payroll, pays all of the bills, helps with the budget, helps with the audit. There's a lot of things that they do in that side of the office with a very, very small amount of staff. Elections has 1 deputy and 2 clerks. We have temps that come in during elections, but it's a small staff. We have very little turnover in the auditor's office. We have the 15 employees and myself, and in my time that I've been here, we've had 1 individual retire, 1 individual passed away, and we maybe had 3 or 4 new positions. We haven't had any new positions, additional positions. We haven't asked for much in the auditor's office. So as I said, they do more than the job requires. They don't get paid overtime. They do get longevity. I would not advocate to get rid of that, because I think that that is something that we can show them for their years of service, that we appreciate them for that. They have no opportunity for a bump up in wages, no 10% increases. I've seen increases with JD, the past budget director, HR, building services, all in the last 2 to 3 years. I think they all got about 10% additional pay. They're reliable. They're chosen because they're reliable. They're mentors for the other employees. If there's a problem or a disgruntled individual that comes in, it's the deputies that's going to be the one that goes and tries to help de-escalate that situation. They have a positive attitude. They do. If I ask them a task, they don't question it. They do it, and they do it well. They've dealt with a lot, and I just think they're deserving of what the compensation board awarded or recommended for the auditor's office, which is 4%. We're number 6 in the county in the auditor role, but it's never been taken into account, the recorder auditor combined responsibilities. So I think you should take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Good evening again. Michelle did bring up some very good points in terms of the recorder's office. And yes, it was split between the auditor and the treasurer's department. So we are the only treasurer's department that offers DNR services. We're one of 3 counties that actually has a satellite office that we have to run. When we talk about the language barriers and everything, we have a very large, diverse, thriving minority community in our county. And it does come through our offices on a daily basis. We deal with, Hispanic, Spanish speakers, Vietnamese speakers, Somalians. We deal with people who, unfortunately, have struggled with literacy issues, even in their own language, even when we have documents that are available in their language. So those are challenges that our department deals with on a day-to-day basis. We deal with having to find what kind of interpretation services can we look at. How do we explain to a non-English speaking person how taxes are paid in arrears? That's hard for most people to understand, how taxes are paid in arrears. I have a hard time explaining it, and I know it. I do it all the time. And so when you're challenged with having to have language barriers, it's the same thing. We are sixth, or seventh actually, when I was looking at our ranking. I think if you take a look at our contiguous counties, we are substantially larger in population, not necessarily in geographic size. Plymouth County is comparable in our size, but the counties adjacent to us are relatively smaller, anywhere from 25 to 50% smaller than we are. In terms of population, they are probably 1/4 of our size. So it's a challenge when we talk about salaries and where we're going to be at, and who we compare ourselves to. Do we compare ourselves to people who live next to us and our neighbors, or do we compare ourselves to counties who are comparable in our size and population and the number of parcels that we have? I mean, some of the statistics in my office would be we have 35,000 renewal notices that go out every single year, right? That's 35,000 Social Security numbers that we have access to. We have 57,000 parcels within our community that we push out property tax statements. Delinquent notices are 5,000 twice a year that we fold and we put out. So yes, the deputies in my office are my frontline staff in terms of when there's an issue with a customer, they're the first line. I'm second, right? It gets ratcheted up to me if they can't talk that customer through a complex situation. The volume and number of trust documents that we have coming through our department would stagger your mind. The number of people who have decided that when mom or dad passes, everything goes into a trust, and then we got to disperse it, and the documents that are associated with that. Yesterday, I had a gentleman come in. He's a conservator now. Okay, and so trying to explain conservatorship and how we transfer and how we handle 30 other vehicles that he's the conservator for, that he has to figure out how to transfer. Those kind of things is what comes through our office. Okay, I appreciate the fact that the board has listened and approved the request for improvement requests for some higher paid staff and having more responsibilities, because it's those kind of documents that we need, that we need that kind of service within our department. But our deputies are the ones who actually read the code, interpret the code, and are responsible for implementing and making sure that we have the right documentation. Because the last thing that we want is for somebody to have a vehicle that they cannot transfer later on in the future because we did it incorrectly. Thanks.
Thanks, Tina.
So just a couple things. One concern that I have is as we talk about how tight the budget is for this year and how tight it's going to be next year, if you do cut all elected, this isn't about me. I'll take a zero deal. I'll maybe address how I can take care of my deputies before I'm done. My one concern is if we know that we're going to be in the same problem next year and possibly the next year, taking them to zero amplifies the problem next year. You make next year's budget more difficult and worse because what are you going to do to catch them up in a year? So if you cut it to 3% or whatever you might do, if you can do that, you give yourself a little bit of room next year so that it's not so bad next year. Because at some point you'll have to catch them up or you will lose people. You'll lose them to the private sector, you'll lose them to whatever. So that would be my one concern and my one caution. And I don't know what we can discuss or what I should say about when we were negotiating. I stand by what I told the two of you in that meeting. I'm fine with a 0% raise. I know that my deputies are working extremely hard on all the things that we're working on behind the scenes that I'm not ready to discuss publicly yet, but I think you're all well aware. Pull my notes back up here. What I am curious to know, and I don't know what the numbers are, I don't know if you can share, Michelle, but what are the savings if they take all of the comp board's recommendations down to zero, what are the real savings? Because it sounds great to the public, and I don't want to be adversarial with this board, but in boards previous, there was a lot of patting ourselves on the back. I'm not saying it's anybody that's up here right now. And the reality is, to the public, it seemed like we were doing great things, and it didn't amount to squat. It was peanuts compared to the overall budget. So I just, with a new board here, I want to publicly be able to say to the public what the real numbers are. Is it a couple 100,000, 180,000? I've heard different things.
If all elected officials, and this excludes the board since that action was already made, was changed to 0%, the general basic fund would save $125,974. The general supplemental would be $12,806, and those are the only two funds affected by the elected officials and their deputies. It would affect 3 deputies in the auditor's office, 4 deputies in the treasurer's office, 5 deputies in the sheriff's office, and 2 deputies in the attorney's office, for a total, plus all 4 elected officials, for a total of $138,980.
So,
Also,
go
this would not change the levy at all, due to the fact that you've already reduced the property revenue, the property tax revenue. It would not change the levy one bit. It would dip into the reserves, and that is the result.
so what's the total, 139?
139 average, yes.
And what's our total county's budget?
In those two funds, 53,760,657. So it's a 0.26%, not 26%, 0.26%.
My take on it is, you can say whatever you want to the media and act like you're going to pat yourself on the back. You're doing it at the sacrifice of the people who are running the county. And to me, that's chicken. It really doesn't amount to much, okay? What we're working on will cover that 10 times. And I mean, again, I don't want to be adversarial, but in the past, I had to bite my tongue and eat some crow a couple times for whatever, because I was going to play, I tried to play nice. I'm just saying, it's not what you might think it is. And I understand that 139,000 is 139,000, but it's at the sacrifice of people who are running the organization. And in the grand scheme of things, it really isn't much. What'd you say? Point whatever? So, again, I'll take the 0. The problem is I can't take 0 and my deputies get an increase in their salary, except for, as an elected official, I can give my deputies a supplemental pay, which was something that I fought with previous board over. There was discrepancies on the legalities of it, and my deputies wanted to sue the county over it, and I talked them out of it because we got the raises that we got over the last several years. But it's my understanding that supplemental pay can be set by the elected officials to their deputies. So if you cut me to 0, will you give me any assurance that if I give them a supplemental pay that's equal to the 3 to 5% raise, that you'll allow the auditor to authorize it? And I mean, there's no reason for us elected officials to do battle with the Board of Supervisors.
Right.
It can be passed as is. And if you want to save something, cut it to 3 or whatever. But I think, the idea that because we're the leaders, that the people below us would have to suffer seems somewhat unfair to them, when everybody who answers to you got at least a 3% raise. But you want us to go and tell our people they should be happy with taking 0. So,
Michelle, does that 139,000 roughly, is that with benefits and everything?
Yes. IPERS and FICA, basically.
Okay. All right. Any other thoughts, board? Any motions, any?
I think what's tough is that as supervisors, we get the calls from the public, and in my third year on the board, this is the most calls that I've had from constituents. And it used to be that you heard a lot from the elderly that were on a fixed income about their taxes, but what's concerning me is you're now getting calls from young families that they don't know how they're gonna afford the house that they're in, they're gonna downsize, both parents are working. I had one just this week that their tax in a rural town on their home that's 25 years old is over $600 a month just in their property tax. And for a lot of them, and a lot of my friends in private sector, they would love to get half of a 4% raise. They'd love to get a raise at all, or the last 2 or 3 years would love to get a raise. And so the economic conditions out in the county are not great. These are really great paying jobs. And so I think it's all relative as to what other people are going through as well. And I think that, at least for me anyway, I heard a lot about taxation and the burden that people are having just trying to make a go of it. And so, again, I said as elected officials, as leaders, we eat last and we have to set the example. And I think that this is well on its way, and we can look at 138,000 out of the total budget, but we need to look at 139,000 out of the 1.5 million that we're still short. I think that's a more appropriate number, and that becomes a much higher percentage. And so every bit helps, and I disagree with the sheriff as far as keeping up. If we give raises this year, all these numbers are 3-4% higher, and that inflates the budget even more the next year. We could have some good things coming down the pipe, but I like to, I don't count my chickens before they hatch either. And so in a year from now, we could be in a totally different financial position. We could be in a really great position, and we could be in a not so great position. And so I think that's just the reality of what it's like to be a public servant. And I think there's a lot of people that are stressing on how they're going to pay their tax bill, and that's a very, very real thing. So.
Okay.
Haven't had the opportunity to sit with our constituents as well and go through their tax bills, especially those who are in townships or incorporated areas. It's striking when we see how much of the county tax is a very small portion of their overall tax bill. So if we're in Sioux City, over 65% is actually going to the school district and to the city of Sioux City. The county is a little bit different, and certainly if you're living out in the county, you're paying a whole lot less taxes if you're in a municipality. But that is also something that is a very big concern, and I deal with it all the time. I hear your pain on some of these calls in terms of where we're sitting with taxes. You know, it's the same thing with everybody else. All of our bills go up. I hear the same thing even with the staff in my office, is that their bills are going up as well, and that their property taxes are going up, and their insurances are going up, and everybody's insurance is going up. So at some point, I made the statement before, we can all take zero. You can have all the leadership at this level and the management team for just the other elected officials, because we've had, you know, the statement was made. The management team for the board got a 3% raise. And, you know, they get supplemental raises during the year outside of their 3% raises that our deputies don't get. They're tied to our salaries. And it is a difficult position to be in, to have to go back and tell them, sorry guys, you still gotta work hard. You still gotta show up every day. You gotta handle those angry customers. You gotta work the overtime, whatever it takes to get the job done. but you gotta be the same leader as everybody else, except for the leadership that answers to the board, the management team that answers to the board. That management team, they get their 3% raise. They get their COLA raise. And so I don't know how many and what those dollar values are, but the $1 million deficit that you're talking about that's gonna come hitting us in the spring, you're right. That's a problem for the county. I think I personally have been actively looking for ways to try to offset that. I've come forward quickly, diligently, and I spend a lot of time trying to do that. My staff spends a lot of time trying to help me out, trying to figure out some of those things and how we're gonna manage the office with less. Okay, so it's a little bit difficult to go back and just tell them that they're not worthy. It's a little bit difficult to have to sit here and go, okay, we're gonna give up $130,000, $140,000. We're gonna face with $1 million deficit. And yet we're bleeding money in all other areas of our county.
What are the percent raises that the treasurer's had in the last 3 years?
Last year, we had a 3% raise.
And it was like 7% the year before.
Yep. And the year before that, I think it was 1 or 2.
I think that's right, I believe it was.
Is that the same, less than or greater than what the wage plan got?
Yes.
Less?
Huh?
Greater than?
Last year, everybody got the same raise. The year before that, yes, we got more than the wage plan because the wage plan got 4 or 5% the year before that. So they were ahead. So this is the conversation of catching up, deferred. It's deferred income at that point. Because what will end up happening is in order to keep the management teams with the right skill set and the dedication to continue working for the county, that does have to happen, we end up playing catch up. So it's just gonna hit us 2 years from now or a year from now, okay? And I would agree. We have a problem with where we sit right now. And cutting expenses is gonna be one of them. Okay? And potentially cutting services.
Catch up in relating to what?
Catch up in relating to wages so that you can hire. We've already had the arguments and the conversations about the attorney's office, right? How they couldn't find anybody. So we've had to do how many MOUs, even though we have a contract? And we continue to go back and we continue to add more money because we have to, right? We can't hire them. We can't hire people for the attorneys, so we keep putting money into it. Time and time again, we're having these conversations.
And I
when
think-
when the union for the courthouse was renegotiated a couple of years ago, the secretaries in the attorney's office all got a 10% raise. Why? They weren't running short on staff. They didn't have the same turnover that I was facing in my office. Okay, we hear time and time again that the other wage plan follows the courthouse contract. So I see 2 clerk 3s who are actually, or secretary 3s, that are supposed to be in the same pay group that my clerk 3s are in, and yet they got the bump up. But they work in departments that
Tina, I
report to the
can't
board.
comment on something that happened before 4 of us were even here.
Well, that happened last year.
I don't remember any clerks getting a 10% raise last year.
You don't remember the additional pay grade, the pay
For the
scale on the
attorneys?
contract for the attorneys?
Those
You
aren't
don't
clerks.
recall approving board secretary to go up a pay grade? You don't recall a
You said
secretary
clerks
3?
before. Attorneys, yeah, we did do something with the attorneys. The
No,
clerks, I don't.
this would be for the legal secretaries. The legal secretaries in the courthouse contract, which is the same contract that my staff worked for, they got a 10% raise because they got a new pay grade. They got a new pay scale, okay? And again, not sure why. I think I've argued pretty heavily over the fact that I was not asked, I was not given any input, I wasn't given the opportunity to discuss what goes on in my office. But I can tell you that the board approved for one of the board secretaries to advance into a higher pay grade, and yet you follow the same, and it's a secretary 3 position, and in the contract, that's a different pay grade. So I'm going to advocate for my staff the best I can. You guys can tell me no. You hold the purse strings. We'll do the best we can on serving our community with the limited resources that we have, with the all-county titling. We'll get to the work when we can get to the work, because that's what's going to end up happening. I'm not going to have deputies working overtime trying to clean up some of the paperwork and try to get all that stuff out if they're going to feel like they're being mistreated. And do I think that this board disrespects them? No, I don't. Do I think that you believe that they're hard workers? Yes, I do. But I think you can also afford them the same thing that you afford your management team.
I think you and I guess coming from private sector, we look at this as we know what the labor market requirements are and the hardness that it is to hire and keep people. And we see that as a serious problem, right? But in public sector, we don't have, and we shouldn't have, the ability to overtax and try to prevent problems that we don't know are necessarily coming. And as detrimental as I think it is to be reactive rather than proactive, I think that's what we're called as public servants to do, so that we're not overtaxing. And with the amount of public that I interface, they feel they're overtaxed. Right, wrong, or otherwise, I understand what you're saying about the cities and what they tax, but we are a part of that too. And I just did the math on what this little increase is gonna be on a farmer on a per acre basis. And it's, we've got farmers that are getting cut off from their operating line of credit, not even giving money to farm this year, and they're gonna be looking at, I can't get money from the bank to buy fertilizer, and I gotta have bigger tax bill than last year. We've got a serious issue, and it starts with the leaders, because we've got businesses leaving, we've got families moving, we're downsizing or not wanting to build, and that is a systemic problem that will continue to hurt us down the road if we can't try to rein some of this in. And so I think this is a great way that all of us that are elected can get started looking at that.
Okay, and I would ask this board to shut off the spigot to the LEC, because that has been something that has been talked about from the public several months ago.
I don't think that's germane to this conversation, but that can be, I think, for another conversation, so. I understand where you're going, but I don't think that's germane to what we're talking about at the moment, respectfully, so.
Mr. Chair.
It
Yeah.
does impact the money that we spend when we authorize a forgivable loan to the LEC authority for $400,000 when we don't have $400,000. When we're paying Baker Group $32,000 a month, and I know, Mark, you actually disagreed with that, but you were overrode by the 2 other LEC authority board members that have no ability or don't have to answer to the community in the same fashion that you do. So I can respect that you don't necessarily disagree with it, but at some point, I do believe this board can say no to the expenditures. But
Yes.
I just want to make it clear that this does not change the levy. This
Right,
does
right.
not change the amount the taxpayer is paying, and I know that you've mentioned a couple times the taxpayer. This does not change the amount of taxes.
Right.
This motion will not change it. This will potentially reduce the reserves, which you say we're, 1 point some in deficit with the reserves. We could have just as easily looked at the beginning balance and made an auditor's journal entry in fiscal year 26 to show that as a balanced budget. Instead, we're reflecting it in the beginning balances as opposed to making a journal entry in fiscal year 26, which would have reflected differently in that amount of deficit. So it's all where you put the numbers, and we're putting it in, changing the beginning balance, whereas we could have made a journal entry in fiscal year 26 and our beginning balances would have been lower, but we would have showed no deficit. So there are other ways that you can look at it, and I think that's the way Dennis probably looked at it in the past, because in the past, there was bigger deficits than we have now, and we've got a higher reserve percentage level forecasted than we have in past years.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle.
And I just want to ask one quick question. Maybe it's a Ryan or a Michelle question. What does a 2% or a 3% just across the board on this look like for an increase?
If all elected officials were reduced to 3%, it would be a $56,000 reduction.
That's off the 138,900.
Yes, that's a total reduction. So it would change from 138,000 reduction to $56,000 reduction.
I got up to ask the question that you already answered, but because I thought I heard you say that even if they cut the 139, none of the constituents are gonna see a difference in their tax bill. None.
Correct.
But it'll help for next year.
Only if you have to dip into the reserves. If it's only coming out of the reserves, it won't, and if revenue sides are up, it won't affect it at all. But, so I mean, my point is, I understand. I wish if it actually lowered the tax bill, I might not even stand here and argue at all, but it isn't going to. So as much as you wish it would, and you want to be able to tell them that you cut that out, you can tell them you cut the 139,000, but we have to be honest and transparent that it didn't lower their tax bill a penny. None. Again, and it's at the sacrifice of the people who are running the show. And, you know, I am very hopeful over the last 3 days, Friday, yesterday, and today, that these issues are going to be a moot point for Woodbury County. I really am hopeful that that's going to be the case. And I wish we could have done this 6 months ago and it would be a moot point. But we're where we're at. And I would just, the other thing I would just ask you to reflect on is, I don't think that I've come up here and I've always tried to not overpromise. And I don't think that anything that I've asked for or told you would happen hasn't come to fruition throughout this difficult process in things that we had some say and control over. The building of the LEC, we in this room had no say or control over it. But all the other things that we had our hands on, we've been able to follow through with what we said. And I'm pretty confident that we're gonna follow through, and hopefully in about 5 or 6 months from now, it's gonna be like wipe our brow and say hallelujah. But the cut's not gonna change that's the only reason I stood up, is because I was gonna ask that question.
Okay, thank you, Chad. All right. So with Dave's, right, the 3% would save, across the board, would save 9% from compensation board's recommendations overall. Of total percentages. So with that, we don't have to, anybody has a motion? One thing I will clarify, it's been said a few times, the quote was, "Who reports to the board got their 3%." I understand what was being said, but I want to clear that up. That can be taken a few different ways, and I know everyone's, I would say, I know your intention in the room, I get what you're saying, but I just think for the public, I just want to make sure that's not skewed or conveyed in a way that somehow there was back scratching or, cronyism. So I don't think that was implied, but I understand what you're saying. I just,
No, yeah, and I don't, in no way do I mean that. No,
Right.
My only point in saying that is, you guys did right by those people. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have gotten their raise. They're all deserving, and you have a more eloquent way of saying the workman is, however you say it.
the workman's worth his weight.
There you
yeah.
go.
Proverbs, yeah.
So, no, I was never intended,
No.
that was never intended.
I just wanted to clarify.
I'm
that.
just,
Right.
for you all to understand, the people that you were able to give raises to that do answer directly to you, they got that raise.
Right.
The ones who are only affected by the raises of the elected officials who answer directly to us, they don't answer to you, they're gonna get zero.
Right.
That was my only point. There
I
was
know,
no,
right.
nothing nefarious or anything, no, I did not intend that. So, I mean, I want to publicly make sure the public knows
Right. That's
that was
all. I
not
wanted to
what I
clarify.
meant at all, so.
Same thing.
You're good.
That wasn't, it's not to imply that somebody was asking for a handout or anything else. It was this board recognized the hard work. And again, I also stated that my deputies work hard and they'll work overtime. I believe that that's the case for all of that management team level as well. And because most of them, if not all of them, are salaried, they don't get compensated for that, you know? So those are important things to be able to, you know, recognize. And we want to recognize the hard work in our department as well. Problem for us is we're beholden to you. You hold the
Right.
purse strings. You make that decision. And when it doesn't impact the taxes and it doesn't impact that tax bill, it seems like it's, you know, where are we going with it? And again, if management team is going to be asked to be leaders, the management team on all levels should be asked to be leaders and go without, and not just certain ones. And that's the way it gets portrayed. If it's meant to be portrayed that way, might not be the intent of the board. That is how it's being received. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that is how management team in my department will feel if it says, well, you know, you got to buck it up with your, you know, with your leader in your department. Okay.
Okay.
The management team that again reports directly for the board didn't have to do that.
So I guess I'm kind of caught off guard by this because the two individuals that we're referencing, we had agenda items to do that, and we specifically talked about it in public meeting, the exact reason why they got those raises. One was not only more workload, but had taken on more staff. One was not anywhere close to comparables of his comparable directors across the state. So you say like we just did it and nobody knew about it and we didn't substantiate why, and yet it was all done in a public meeting with all this information provided in the backup and discussion here. So I'm a little
And
taken
last
back.
week when you approved wage plans, they not only did they get the additional increases interim, they got their 3% COLA. Okay, and no, I didn't stand up and say, well, no, they shouldn't get it, and no, the management team level of the wage plan shouldn't be getting it. I didn't say that. Why? Because I think they're deserving of it. And if it's not impacting the tax bill and it's within our budget, then I think we should probably say yes, okay, because it does impact our community. Okay, and what we're talking about tonight is that the leadership, the management team at the other elected official offices, for the rest of us, they have to be leaders and eat last for as well. So that's my point on if that's what it has to be at management level, then it should be a management level all the way around. So
I disagree.
and we can agree to disagree then.
Thank you, Tim.
One other quick question by me, and I think, Michelle, you just covered this. How many deputies are in each office for the auditor, attorneys, sheriff, and treasurer?
The auditor has 3 85% deputies. The treasurer has 4 deputies, 1 85. She'll have to probably tell you the percents of the other ones.
One is at 85, two are at 80. I think one gets the step this year to 80. And then the other position is the open position and is planned to be starting at 70%, but it'll depend on experience.
Okay.
The 85% level is set by legislation, so she can't bump others up to 85. Sheriff can talk about his.
Well, I'm going to give you my best educated guess. I have 5 that are percentage deputies, 3 that are politically appointed, and the other 2 are a different class, but they're a percentage of the sheriff. One is at 85, I believe 2 are at 84. One is at 82, and one is at 80. What I would say, as just to so that you are aware, statutorily, the elected officials can have every one of our appointed deputies at 85%. So, but I don't do that because they're different rank. In our organization, they're different rank, and it doesn't make sense to have a lieutenant at 85% the same as a captain, or the chief deputy at 85 and a captain at 85. So even there, you know, I can't do the math quickly in my head, but we're probably 6% savings of what legally, statutorily, we can set it at. And it's my understanding that if I set it at 85, the board has no discretion. You have to fund it at that 85 when they're a percentage deputy. So even there, we're doing things to be fiscally responsible. You know, and so I don't know what the other elected officials are, but
What was the
Can I
attorney's
answer,
office?
just to finish the answer, is 2 in the attorney's office at 85%.
Okay.
So operationally in the treasurer's office too, how it's organized, there's the 185% deputy, because that's the chief deputy that is actually, you know, the other deputies, it's kind of similar to what the sheriff was talking about. They're just kind of different responsibilities. So, I mean, that's the way it's operated, but again, I mean, I'm open to looking at some of that stuff, but we've always kind of held it that way. And had the other 3 deputies were typically at 80%, and because one retired and left, that's why it drops down again, because it's potentially because of experience.
There is a code limitation on certain deputies at the 80% level, so if that was gonna be explored, we would need to review the code section as well as far as what can be done and can't be done.
does that mean they can't go above it or they can't drop below it?
Well, I don't think it applies to the sheriff's deputies, so I know we looked at that previously with yours.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I don't want to interrupt, but, me just looking at it, I mean, just new coming into this, I mean, if I'm looking at it correctly here, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, possibly over the last 1, 2, 3, and now including this year for wage plan employees, it looks to me like they're about a 10.5% overall increase. And if the elected officials and deputies were at a 3%, 7%, and it was a 1 to 2%, they're at about 10%, I don't know, 11 to 12% so far, but I think, I mean, just my thinking, I think I would be in maybe like a 2% range increase and just keeping in line with total over the years.
Do you want to make a discussion or motion, or?
So here are my thoughts that will not make everyone happy, just like all of our own thoughts. We do have to balance the feelings of the deputies with the feelings of our constituents. That is a struggle on the board every year. These are accepted appointments. I don't think it's reasonable for me as an elected official or any other elected official in Woodbury County to assume that their wages will increase every single year, especially based on the board's history, the response from the public, and things like that. So therefore, it would not be reasonable for a deputy to assume that every single year they would get an increase as well, as long as they are tied to the wage of the elected official whose appointment they accepted. Although, another thing is, although previous boards have linked this, I think, way too much to the action of balancing the budget, just because coincidentally it's the last item we have to do. I've never thought of it that way. However, even though it's not dealing with a balanced budget right now, $139,000 is still spending, and taxpayers do still care about an amount like this. An example would be the Sioux City Council struggling for 2 to 3 months over pretty much this exact amount for the Human Rights Commission. Obviously, in that case, they wanted to increase their own taxes, or at least a vocal subset was successful in doing that. But it is, an amount like this is not unimportant to people that read the news or contact us. Also, in regards to the board's management team, I think in that case, it can be best explained by the fact that we as a board fund our management team by the fact that the supervisors are like 35th in pay in the state. So if we had one less person on our management team, yeah, we could all raise our own salaries $10,000, $15,000, or not do that and have the chair's stipend be like $80,000, $70,000, $60,000. But that's not what we do. And that's just the function of the office that this board has chosen to do. And as a county grows, or in our case shrinks from 5th to 7th over the last 10 years, we have to adjust and decide, are we half-time? Are we 2/3 time? Are we 3/5 time? It's really tough to say. And so that's why we have a management team. And that's how it's funded. It's not like we are in line and we also have a management team helping us. The supervisors are objectively, mathematically speaking, not in line. And that's why we have a management team. On to the motion. I agree with Mark, mostly at the very beginning of what he said, meetings previous, as far as leading by example. The board is very supportive of ourselves taking 0. I would support that as well for the other elected officials, with the exception of the auditor. And I would suggest a 4% increase for the auditor, knowing that the stipend would be taken out due to the understanding we received today. The reason is because obviously the vacancy in the budget office created a situation where not only the auditor herself, the incoming auditor herself, but also her deputies were tasked with a unique situation that is not replicated in any other department or office, even if other offices are short-staffed and have been short-staffed. That sort of disruption where you have to take over for someone who passed away, while training someone who is going to be your replacement, while training someone who is going to be the new employee, is a task that needs to be quantified in some way. And so I would support a 4% for the auditor. Now, my thought on how to address that by virtue of it being permanent is, if the board wanted to, the same people will be up here next year. If we want to signal or just keep it in the back of our minds that next year, if there are increases to other elected officials, we could then say, remember last year when we gave 4% to the auditor and we gave 0% to everyone else? We don't have to do as much as we might otherwise do for the auditor. In that way, we would make it a 1-year increase. The auditor would essentially get this a year ahead of time, assuming there were increases next year, which is not an unreasonable assumption. The board doesn't have a history of going 0% for everyone year after year after year, except, of course, itself. So I would move to set the raises at 0%, except for the auditor, to set that at 4%.
Second.
All right. Got motion by Ung, second by Nelson. All right. Any further discussion on that?
And for reference, the $5,000 stipend as a percent was roughly 4.5%, so an addition, but just if you break it down as a percent, that's what it equates to.
Which still with the deputies, it bumps theirs up as well, but,
I think,
okay.
well, I was gonna say, I think it's a good motion, so since it's motion seconded, I don't disagree with this, but I would like to see a 2% across the board. That's just my thoughts on this, but let's put this to a vote, and we'll.
And there's a great reduction in the balance of the budget, but we're still negative. And I'm new to this board, but, you know, when you take a look at that scripture in Luke 10:7, that the labor is worth his wage, you know, I'm in favor of 1.5 to 2% raise myself. So I think, you know, people should receive that increase, so.
Motion is full, let's vote on it. And I think it's a good motion. As is, it's a good motion, so. All right, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Can you confirm what the motion
sure.
is? I didn't hear an amendment. All I heard was the first motion.
Oh, right, yeah, there's only the motion on the floor. The motion was 0% for all elected officials except for the auditor at 4%. Yeah, that's the motion, yep. So,
Okay.
okay. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
All right. Motion dies.
Can
2
you
to
say who nayd,
Sure.
please?
Nay was Bittinger, Dietrich, and Carper.
Thank you.
Yep. Approve is Ung and Nelson. With that, I'll make a motion just for 2% across the board.
Second.
All right. Motion by Bittinger, second by Carper. All right.
Can we have some discussion on that, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
So in this motion, I mean, I'm in favor of, but everybody is with the understanding, obviously, there's going to have to be big cuts for fiscal year '27, which has to start for as soon as we get this budget passed. And, you know, next year, it might be 0 across the board, who knows? But, I mean, I think this is fair according to what it looks like, and I guess I'm in favor of it. So.
Okay. Any comments or amendments to it?
I would just say we keep saying that, but at some point we have to do that, not just to necessarily balance next year, but to fund the next fiscal year. We have used not 1.5, I believe, we've used more than that in reserves. And the fact of the matter is, unless things change, which we hope they do, we will not have 2 million or whatever we actually use from reserves the next fiscal year. So not only do we have to make up 1.5, we have to find a way to sustain 2 million without the assurance that we have reserves that could do that. So when we say it might be 0 next year, I don't believe that. If we're going to approve as a board something that's not 0 this year, it's not going to be 0 next year. I mean, we're going to keep kicking this. You know, if we want to equate this with spending and balancing the budget, it's not going to work.
And I think we also have to think about where those reserves have come from. So rightfully so, Matthew, on your comments. So a large portion of the reserves have come from the county attorney's office, especially the last 3 years, because they've been so short-staffed.
Correct.
And James is projecting that they're going to be fully staffed maybe by the end of the summer. So we're not going to have that return back to reserves from there. And then, you know, another one that's been the jailers within the sheriff's office. And they got a decent raise this year. Will that fix that problem? Maybe, maybe not. But let's be hopeful and say that it does. There won't be reserves coming back from that department either. So I think those are some things we have to think about, is where are those reserves coming from, and will they be there next year? And I don't know that for the county attorneys, that I don't think they will at all unless we have a major meltdown there. So anyway, more things to consider as far as reserves coming back.
Right.
So I don't want to get scolded for talking about the LEC, but since we're talking about it, about the correctional officers, it is going to be in this board and the county's best interest to look at that lease agreement moving forward. If things come to fruition, that I hope come to fruition in the next few months, a couple of you I've talked privately, but I will just say to any of the board members who want to speak to me individually, I think the board really needs to look at that very seriously, because you know it could be in the county's favor of close to $1 million. But we can get more into that. But I think You know, that needs to get really, I know you do. I want all of the board to, you know, and to publicly say it out loud so that when something does happen publicly down the road, nobody's taken by surprise.
Sure. Thank you, Chad. All right, motion's on the floor for 2% across the board, all right? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
All right, so the nays were Ung and Nelson, and the ayes were
Carver.
Carver and Dietrich. All right, so that motion passes 3-0 for 2% across the board.
Mr. Chair, can you repeat that for the auditors? You couldn't catch that.
Oh, sure, it's 2% across the board, so the ayes are Carper, Dietrich, and Bittinger, and the nays were Ung and Nelson, yeah, for that. All right, moving on to item D. It's adoption of the fiscal year 2026 budget and resolution. Michelle, is there anything on this, or any, other than just move to approve?
Yes, that is required to have a resolution approved with the adopted budget. So after all these figures are worked and input, then we'll have to have you sign the budget, return it to the auditor by 4:30 tomorrow afternoon in order to be in compliance. And this resolution is to adopt the budget with the changes that were made today.
Okay. All right. Any discussion on the final adoption? All right. With that, I will move to approve the adoption of the fiscal year 2026 budget and the resolution.
Second.
All right, motion by Bittinger, second by Nelson. Any discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. All right, now to take a recess from the Board of Supervisors meeting to convene the Orton Slough Drainage District Trustees meeting. Item number 10 on the agenda is to approve, of the minutes of the April 15, 2025 meeting.
I'll move it.
Second.
All right, motion by Nelson, second by Dietrich. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. We now will adjourn the Orton Slough Drainage District Trustees meeting and continue back to the Board of Supervisors meeting. Number 11, from County Treasurer Tina Bertrand, is the Treasurer's Office closing on Tuesday, May 6, 2025 for all staff training meeting, and this is just informational update for the public.
Good evening again. Okay, so every year we have a District 3 meeting, which is the counties on the kind of basically the Northwest Iowa area. DOT comes out and holds a training session with us. This year it is in Storm Lake. I think Lakeview is where it's at. And, you know, again, what we do is we're able to meet with the DOT and kind of go over some of their changes. So they have some changes coming up in the software system that we utilize, which is going to be a huge overhaul. That we'll be reviewing, obviously, the privacy training that we talk about every year. That's something that's very critical because we do have quite a bit of private information that we have to be able to handle. And then it's just other changes that are happening from the legislative standpoint for motor vehicle services. They also cover driver's license, but since we don't do driver's license, we only have to worry about the motor vehicle side of it. But it's a good time to be able to continue training staff on the important work that they do for our community. So basically, we'll be closed on Tuesday,
Okay.
May 6th for the entire day. We have it posted on our website, and we will have it posted on all of our scheduling software.
All right, that was my question, yeah, where's it posted, so, okay.
Yep.
Perfect, thank you, Michelle. I mean, Michelle, Tina, wow.
Tina, I'd like to say
Wow.
thank you for, usually, it's not that you guys are closed very often, but typically when you do, whether it's planned or an emergency, you usually email the whole board. And I appreciate that because I will get questions and say, well, I went to go register my car and it was closed, what's going on? And I can say, oh, well, a month ago, I got an email that they're doing this. And so I appreciate that because we do get questions. When you guys aren't there, you see a lot of people every day. And so it helps that we can tell them what's going on, so.
Well, on the plus side, I think IT is doing some rewiring upstairs in the head end room. So I told them, have at it. Our computers can be down.
Nice, thank you. All right, on to item number 12 from Community Action Agency, Gene Logan. It's approval of letters of support for Community Action Agency programs. So Gene, come on up. Everyone can see from your backup, it's just, there's some letters, some template letters that in the back there, and so, yep, Gene, just,
Hi. Well, we were pretty surprised to learn that it seems like in the budget, what will be zeroed out will be the Energy Assistance Program, which helped 3,407 families last year. And also that now Head Start, it looks like but also going to be having zero budget as proposed. And so to that, I just wanted you to know, we bring into the community $7,257, or $257,000. We serve 353 preschool children. Of that, 179 of them are in the preschool initiative. So that allows for full-day preschool care for 3 to 5-year-olds. That's very important for working families, which is, we serve all kinds of families, actually. For early Head Start, we served 177 0 to 3-year-olds. We have some classrooms for them. We would get more if we could be funded for more. And also 18 pregnant women. It's important in Woodbury County to remember that 1 in 6 kids under the age of 5 live in poverty. These are really important programs that we have. We also are asking for a letter of support for the Community Services Block Grant. That's federal funding that comes to us, and members of our board get to decide how that money is distributed. It helps us in shortfalls. For example, we get money from the Department of Education for Shared Visions. That serves 48 kids in a classroom over at the Irving Preschool. They never give us enough money, so we use CSBG money to backfill that to make that program work. We also sometimes have used CSBG money when there was no general assistance money, or we helped people during COVID that were over the general assistance guidelines because we had a little bit of additional money. So for general assistance, it was 896 people. That's important for you to remember. We'll be talking about our budget. Not today, thank goodness, because you've done that enough. But in the future, we'll have to. And as an agency in total, and this is because of CSBG, we were able to help a total of 15,211 people. The majority of those live in Woodbury County. So I'm asking for letters of support. I have also gone to the Siouxland Chamber. They're going to Washington. Some of you might be going on that trip. I've asked Chris McGowan to also pitch to our senators and representatives that we're speaking with. These are important federal programs. They make a giant impact in Woodbury County. In Head Start alone, we have almost 100 employees involved in preschool programming. So if those budgets were zeroed out, what do parents do? And I guess it's also important to know that Head Start and Early Head Start are comprehensive programs. They are more expensive to run. We have family advocates working with families, and we are responsible for the mental health, physical health, and really not just of the child, getting them ready for school, but the whole family. Because the theory is that if you improve conditions for the family, you have also benefited that child. So we have several parents that are in school. They go back and get their certificates or degrees. That's because it's a supportive program. It's not just preschool. Sometimes people want to know, why is it so expensive? That's why. So I hope that you would all sign these 4 letters. They are 4 really different programs. If you have any questions, I would be happy to, poor Kent, he knows. I'm happy to always talk about our programs because I'm so proud of what we do.
all right, thank you, Gene. All right, any questions? All right, I'll move to approve letters of support.
Second.
All right, motion by Bittinger, second by Nelson. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Gene. All right, number 13 on the agenda from Secondary Roads, Laura Severs. First is to approve fiscal year 2026 Woodbury County Secondary Roads 5-year construction plan.
In
Good afternoon. In the board packet, it had preview written on that, and that was because at the time DOT had not approved that. I was wondering if you would accept a new 5-year program and budget that is DOT approved.
Okay. Any questions? Any? Okay, all right, I'll move to approve. Secondary Roads 5-year construction program, all right. All in favor, say aye. Aye?
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes 5-0. All right, so Laura, on these,
So there's 6 of them there.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to do this from this. It's just me. You just, all for the chair, right?
No, 6, one for each of you,
Oh,
a
one for each
packet
of us,
for
okay.
each of you.
All right. Make sure we get these right. There's that. Do you have one?
And then one for Michelle.
I got one for Michelle. One for you, one for Matthew, one for Michelle. Okay. All right. Second is the approval of a new mechanic foreman position and direct secondary roads to initiate that advertising for this position. Melissa had informed us we will, when we make the motion, their formal motion will be to motion to approve the hiring of the new mechanic, motion for the approval of the new mechanic foreman position, excuse me, let me read this right, correct clarification of the wording, so. Yeah, Melissa will initiate the hiring and advertising, but we were just gonna tonight approve the new mechanic foreman position by itself, so. With that, Laura, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. On the, again, this is Iowa DOT required to have the Board of Supervisors approve the program and budget for Woodbury County secondary roads. If you'd like, I can go through our program here a little bit. The accomplishment year is fiscal year 2026. A couple, like always in Woodbury County, we need to approve, replacement of bridges on that. We also have the South Bridge project, although it shows that it would be paid this year, that would not ever happen. That's something that we need to sit down with Iowa DOT. They are funding that project, and then that's a reimbursement project on that item. And then the budget is just reflective of what the county has decided to do for the secondary roads budget.
Okay. All right, any questions about this position?
Oh, sorry, I was going on the first item.
Oh, okay.
The approval of the budget and program. Sorry. Did you guys approve that?
We did, yeah.
Okay, so that was good to go on
We're
that
good to go,
one.
yep.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay, I was like,
Then on the second one for the position, that was, I had brought that to you before, but I also hadn't brought you how much the pay would be for that. In reviewing that, I just wanted to make sure that that was acceptable to the board for that pay also, which it was going to be reflective of the pay of what the foreman already received. I truly believe that this position will create cost savings for our department, and I think that if you have looked, we're now at $490,000 in outside labor and parts. So even with that, I'm sure that a good qualified applicant and then somebody that we hire would hopefully be able to give us a much lower cost on those items that are, I feel like, hurting our budget quite a bit.
okay. And you proposed here the pay range is $76,578.06 to $87,151.22.
Correct.
Right, okay, all right. Michelle, when we make this, if it's approved, do we need to state that pay range in there, in that motion, or how does that all work for this position? Oh, can you
I'm
hear me?
sorry, because this thing over here hums. It's
Oh,
hard
okay.
to hear you when
Oh,
you're
sure.
talking.
No problem. This pay range, do we need to approve this? Does the supervisors need to approve this pay range in the motion? Because tonight it's in there, the approval of the new mechanic position, but I believe from the backup,
Is it in the backup material? And
let me look, I don't believe.
you're creating the position right now for the first time?
Correct, yeah, and it's not in the backup, no. Do we just add that into
So
the motion?
you're approving the position, but not authorization to hire?
Not yet, yeah.
Correct.
Because Melissa will
Okay.
handle the initiation to hire, correct, Melissa?
Yeah.
Yep. Right
Okay,
next week,
so you're
yeah.
just approving the position.
Position, yeah. Do we need to state in there the pay range, or does that come next week with Melissa?
Normally, I don't believe the pay range is included in the
Okay,
motion, just
okay.
approve the position, and
Okay.
then the rest will be worked up
Sure.
afterwards for
Okay.
initiating the hiring.
All right, just want to make sure we're doing everything right. All right,
That'll be included in the authorization hire
okay,
pay range. So
All right.
when you approve that, pay range.
perfect. All right, thank you, Melissa. All right, any discussions on this position? It seems like it'll be a money saver for the county, maybe make our fleet more efficient and get back out on the road. So I think, as you said, Mark and Dave, you guys seem it's
Yeah.
a no-brainer position, so.
I'm very supportive. I think it'll save us money. I think this position will pay for itself and hopefully free up funds that secondary roads can use other places and help our guys be more efficient in their
Okay.
work.
Okay. All right, well, I'll move it.
Second.
All right, so I move to approve the new mechanic foreman position. All right, motion by Bittinger, second by Nelson. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes 5-0.
I've got a question for Laura while she's still up here.
Yeah, I've got a question. Go ahead, and I've got a question, yeah.
Well, is it on the mechanic? Or
No,
is it
it's
the
on,
bridges?
yeah,
Ask yours first.
real quick. I see on here, there's only one spot that says chairman of the board to sign. You said every supervisor needs to sign, or just for their information?
Just for that. Yeah,
Just for their information to have?
yep.
Okay, okay. Thank you. That's
Sorry
all my
about that.
questions, okay.
My question was about the bridges. So, I didn't see in here the bridge on 180th that's over Rock Creek between Lennox and Lucas. And I know they've been out taking bore samples, so I don't know if the K20 was a misprint or if I'm not seeing it, but that was my one question.
Okay, can I get back to you on that one? Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
And so what we're dealing with right now is we have borrowed ahead on our farm to market account, which is a great idea. It's a really smart move to spend that to its limit, just in case all of a sudden the farm to market funds go away. And so Mark has probably always done that. I'll definitely continue that. So when we're borrowed to our max, then we have to like start pushing projects back, and that's what happened with this budget. So I'll figure out where that one's at. Also then, we are also borrowed ahead on our bridge funding also. And so it is getting a little unique. If a bridge is a big bridge, is that a big bridge? So I might be moving that one back further or pausing it right now and maybe bringing in a little bridge just so we have a project to do next year. Because we need to build that account back up. So
Sure.
it's playing with money. They're all going to get done, and I think we should all continue to go forward with designing these because it seems like the federal government at times in the past will get really tight on how much money they're giving to transportation and things like that, and then all of a sudden they'll do a package. And as long as you have a really good project and it's shovel ready, in other words, it's on the shelf ready to be designed, you can easily put it out and get that money from the feds also. So it is a bit of a game. Sorry if that one's not in there. I will get that put back in and figure that out.
Well,
But-
and the reason I asked, we talked about it last year with Mark, obviously,
Okay.
but that 180th is the only road between Correctionville and Anthem that goes east and west between 31 and the Rock Branch Road. And it got downgraded, I think it's just 3 tons now, but it's displaced a lot of farm traffic because now they have to go either clear up to Correctionville or clear down to Anthem, and then they're on paved roads, which a lot of farmers, that's just more of a hazard for them. So, but that's a big creek there and a big bridge. So, but I just wanted to ask about that. We'll talk
Yeah.
later this week on that, so.
I understand them farmers not wanting to be on the paved roads, so, yep.
All right. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Laura. All right, item number 14 up from Board of Supervisors, Mark Nelson's consideration of amendment to the Woodbury County zoning ordinance, specifically to revise the land use summary table of allowed uses to classify borrow pits for earth materials as a conditional use within the agricultural states zoning district. So Mark, the floor is yours.
Yes, so last week we had a farmer come in that had been working on a borrow pit, some land that he owns off of a county road that he wanted a driveway to better access the property. He was told that the only place he could get it for safety reasons, for, sight distance, was in a place that couldn't be built because his land was too steep and needed to bring it down to grade. So he got a contractor within the county to start doing that work, a reputable contractor, a very good contractor. The dirt was being hauled to Sergeant Bluff for the school addition down there, and come to find out that he cannot be doing that because it's on ag estates zoning and not ag preservation. If he was a farmer just moving it on his own property for his own use, he could, but because it's going off-site, it's considered a borrow pit. And so it really kind of raises the question. This ordinance was put, I think, in 08 or 09, talking with Dan Priestley, and Dan and I spent a lot of time on the phone together last week working through this, and so Dan has been very hands-on on this, but it's just a very interesting thing because he's trying to improve access to his property, which he cannot do. Access is onto a paved road, so sight distance is very important for safety of not only anyone leaving that property, but for motorists. The steepness of the hill makes it very tough for him to do anything with that property. And so it was a win for him to get the dirt taken down and get a driveway for his property. It was a win for the contractor, who is obviously has a job. It was a win for Sergeant Bluff, who is getting very affordable dirt, very, very close, because they have to build their property up because it's in a floodplain, or it's just in a low area, I guess, maybe not a floodplain, but a low area. And then it was a win for Woodbury County because that hill that they're taking down is a major snow trap. And snow gets piled up there, and I've talked with some of our staff that said that that's always a tough one to dig out, and they've had people get buried in there. And so it was kind of a win all the way around, yet here we sit that he cannot proceed. And so I think that there needs to be a conditional use, because there's not even an avenue now for him to pursue a permit to continue this work. And so, but ironically enough, if across the fence from him was an ag preservation zoning, there would be an avenue. So that's kind of the fallacy here. There hasn't been any complaints from any neighbors, no nuisance complaints. I've been told that some neighbors have reached out that they are very happy to see that snow trap taken out because it's a detriment to them for winter driving. So anyway, this is just a motion to give direction to zoning to look at adding a conditional use. The DNR was out to the site last week. Didn't sound like there was too many issues there. They had set up berms to control any runoff and that sort of thing. And so I think that this is a rather silly ordinance that is inhibiting, honestly, some really good development and growth in Woodbury County. And Dan, if you have anything that you'd like to add, since you've been working on this just as much as I have in communication with this farmer, but it's just something that I think we need to look at. I think it's 08, 09 was when this was put in, so it's quite a while ago.
Yeah, that's a reflection of the 2008 ordinance, but as far as the agenda item, it's to direct the zoning commission to take this up, and you have the authority as supervisors under the zoning ordinance to expect of them to hold the public hearing, to look at a recommendation back to you for the consideration of putting the conditional use as an opportunity for the agricultural estates. So I would anticipate, if we get that direction, to work with the chair of the zoning commission to schedule that at their next meeting, likely to evaluate that as a potential option, of course, with the normal public hearing process.
And Dan and I have visited a lot with Joshua on this too, and what's crazy is the way the ordinance is written. Us supervisors can't grant him a variance, which is crazy, and even the Board of Adjustment can't grant a variance for this. So there's really no avenue for him or anybody else to pursue. And so I think this is warranted of an overhaul.
Right. Yep.
And if this many parties involved in this process are all winning, and their properties are being enhanced, and it's a net negative, a net positive for the county. And if there's no nuisance complaints, they're following all, local and state guidelines. To stop it is just silly, it just call it what it is, it's silly. So that's what this is about, guys, and I hope that we can resolve this and resolve it quickly.
Yep. All right. Any other discussion? If not, I'll move it.
Thanks, Dan. Second.
All right, motion by Bittenger, second by Nelson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes
Thanks,
5-0. Thank you, Mark, for putting that on. I agree. It's good to revisit this and allow our citizens to help better the county here.
Well, and I visit with our secondary road staff, because I get calls, I don't know if any of you guys had, but have in the past, but I've gotten calls from landowners that want the county to come and take these snow traps out. And we don't have the money to just go take these hill
Right.
downs. Sometimes if we have a dirt, a highway project or a bridge project where we need dirt, it works out that we can take some dirt off their hill and accomplish that. But it just never happens that we have a citizen that wants to do it, and it costs us nothing, and we get this huge benefit, and now we can't even do that. So,
At least he doesn't have to bring the dirt back that's gone.
so
Good
anyway.
point. All right, moving on here. Item number 15 is reports on committee meetings. I'll start off. I just had a DCAP meeting, and all we did was approval of new service contracts and amending of current fiscal year service contracts for programs out in Woodbury County. And then we had our SHIP meeting. Just big thing is we're updating some offices. And then ECI, Early Childhood Iowa, is being reformatted along with the behavioral health regions. And so they're waiting just to see the final funding formulas and organizational chart for the new districts. There'll be 7 new districts. There's currently 34 ECI groups or service regions in Iowa, and they'll be reformatted into 7 main districts like behavioral health. And so, so they're just waiting for that. So there's some anxious tension there, but that's all that I have from last week. But anyone else?
I just attended the Regional 4 Local Emergency Planning Committee. I guess there's a training event taking place May 15th and 16th in Cherokee, and also the Region Hazardous Materials Response Commission. There's a lot of hazardous materials that come through our corridor through Highway 29, 20, and also 75. They just want to keep everything up to date with their training. There's some FEMA funds that they're looking at, but I can talk to the board later on and share those numbers. We don't have a solid number right now, but it's something that each county is going to have to invest into, so.
So if we get any suspicious mail, we can hand it over to you and we'll take care of it? All right.
That's right. We're not going down. That's good. All right. Anybody else? Any other meetings? Okay. Hearing none. All right. Let's move on. Citizen concerns? All right. Seeing none. Thank you, citizens. All right. Next up, item number 17, board concerns. The only thing I had, Michelle, in the backup, I see the draft resolution for that ordinance on the last one, item 14, but was there a document for us to sign at all for that?
Dan is shaking his head no.
No, okay, that was it, okay, that's just, all right, just want to make sure, okay, all right.
Supervisor Dietrich and I had, if you're done, Dan, I don't want to interrupt you.
No, good, that's it, that's all I had.
Supervisor Dietrich and I had a meeting last week. I was hoping Gene Logan would stick around, but that's okay. We had a meeting with Gene and Megan Knoll from Community Action and Treasurer Bertrand, Auditor Scaff, and then we had some folks from the state, was it Department of Health? What, or FEMA, they work with FEMA, I guess, but we're gonna have an agenda item here in the next couple weeks about a buyout. So a lot of the flood victims that we had in the county were in town. They were either in Riverside or Correctionville. So our jurisdiction, we didn't deal with those folks, but we actually did have one rural resident outside of Anthon that their home was flooded, and they are seeking a buyout. There were I believe at this time there's 13 homes in Correctionville that were part of the that are part of the buyout program. Again, we have nothing to do with that. And I'm not sure how many in Riverside, but there's one in the rural part of the county. It's right on the east edge of town. And it's kind of a sad deal. They had acquired this property about 15 years ago. I drive by it all the time. And so they had done a lot of work to the property, had added outbuildings, fixed up the house, really cleaned the place up. And some of the damage that they incurred from that flood is, they're looking for a buyout. So because it falls under our jurisdiction, we would have to pay, the feds pay, I think it's 50%, and the state pays, I think, 35%, and the county's 15%. Is that right, Michelle? Don't quote me, I think that's right.
I
Do you
think
remember?
it's
Or Tina?
70 and 15.
70, 15, 15, maybe? But yeah, I know our share is 15%. We'll see what the treasurer has to say.
My recollection is the state representative said there's a minimum of 85% is covered between both the
Oh,
state
state,
and the
yeah, and the Fed,
and the
yeah.
federal government.
Yeah.
So, and that's a minimum. They did say that there was a potential that it might be more than that, but I
Okay.
don't think we'll know what that is until we get into it.
So our portion would be this 15% at a maximum, so it could be less than that. And that's paid on the assessed value of the property. And so there's a whole process that we would have to go through. We'd have to get an independent assessment of that property to know what the value is, and there's a process for that. Then, which it's gonna be roughly around $50,000 is what our share would be if the board wanted to do that. This family has discussed that they would cover the county's costs out of their own pocket because it would still help them out. Mikey Montino is working with them and Joshua on drafting a legal agreement that we could do that with. It sounds like that is something that we could do. And so this is going to be coming up here the next couple weeks. I was on for an hour with that. I don't know how much longer you guys were on after I got off, but there's a lot of questions. It's a kind of confusing process because it's FEMA. There's timelines that we'd have to adhere to as far as the demolition, the bidding of contractors, site management, all those kinds of things. So there's going to be a lot of things for us to think about. So I would encourage Kent and Dan and Matthew to reach out to Dave or I or Tina or Michelle, and we can kind of give you some more particulars of what the process consists of. But Mike Montino and Community Action have done a lot of work with this family thus far, and we would kind of be the last leg. But the kicker of this would be if the buyout goes through, the county would keep this property. It would be ours. No one could ever build on it. We could never sell it. We could do anything agricultural on it, so it could be seeded for haying. We could rent it out just as regular crop ground, just as long as nothing permanent is put on there. It's 6 acres, so it's not like it moves the needle,
Right.
But anyway, it's just unfortunate because I think they've been good citizens and good taxpayers, and they took care of their property, and it was a pretty crazy event that changed the course of their lives. But so that will, I think, May 15th, we maybe have to have something, May 20th. The deadline is coming up. What's that?
I think it was about midday.
Yeah, so in the next week or two, we'll have to have this on the agenda for a discussion. But thanks for you two being on that, because everybody had a lot of questions. I mean, and Joshua, there might be a lot more questions yet before it's over, but it's quite a confusing process.
Okay. I've just got two things. Tonight, we have our assessors meeting at 6 PM. So yeah, I see our county assessor there in the back. So I just need one of the supervisor to be with me up there, so if one of you can stay. Second of all, I do have some good news to report. It's good and bad, but I'll start with the good news. I was talking with the Crinton Center. If you remember, we just passed the Community Development Block Grant application and all that. And from what we've been initially being told from the state, it looks like it's going to be accepted. It's going to be approved. They're excited. They think it's fine. Everything looked great. But when we submitted the minutes to that, to the state, me and Christina had worked on the minutes, working with Lisa up there in the auditor's office. We made sure everything was in the minutes, what we thought was needed per their guidelines. Well, the state rejected that, said it's not detailed enough. They said the project's great. The board did everything else correctly, the backup, everything else, handled the meeting well, but the minutes have to reflect a line-by-line itemization of what's talked about. So we're going to have another public hearing. All it is just more of a perfunctory public hearing of the new date and just literally state it again. So just letting the board know about that. But the state was glad that the Woodbury County was going forward with this and helping with Critton Center. So it's good news, and it is going to be approved, which is good. But just FYI, it'll cost another $70 in publication fee. But I just want to give the board the heads up on that. But thank you for bearing with us. We did get from the state a line-by-line, itemized line of what are they, word by word, what do they require? And that will be in the minutes. So I talked with the state, Christina and I, so we did get that. So anyhow, thank you for the board for being patient in that, but Critton Center says thank you to the whole board, to just for working with them, and thankful that the board partnered with them, so. But that's all that I have. Anybody has anything else, board concerns, or?
I will not be here for the next 3 meetings.
Okay.
I will be taking my wife and 2 daughters to Japan.
Okay.
I was gonna say, Matthew, is that not like the state to tell us how, or that we have to do something and then we do it and they're like, no, you have to do it exactly like this? And they didn't tell us till after, anyway, sorry, Dan, I'm glad it got approved and we'll get it right the second time.
Yeah,
you
we'll
know?
get it right. Well, I never fought anybody for learning, so now we know when we do these again. Now we know exactly what we need, so.
We just need to do a record roll call vote on every single metric in the letter,
Almost
so.
verbatim, yeah. All right, anything else? All right, hearing none. All right.